بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise is due to Allah, and after that, all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we seek help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek forgiveness in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they will be guided. And anyone who has been misguided by Allah, you will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one without partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and His messenger. Proceed forward. The hadith canons actually relate a story. Shortly after the battle of Hunayn, the Prophet ﷺ was distributing the charity to the few people whose hearts needed to be reconciled. And so there came a man, and he's described in the hadith as a man with a thick beard, a prominent cheekbones, deep sunken eyes, protruding forehead, and a shaven head. And the people describe him as he was a Bedouin. He was come to the area where the Prophet ﷺ was, and he explained to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he said, "Fear Allah, ittaqullah, ya Muhammad." And another verses, another narration it says, ya Muhammad. And so first of all, he's addressing the Prophet ﷺ in a very derogatory way. I mean, and the Prophet was taken aback, and he responded back and said, "Who will obey Allah if I disobey Him? Am I not sent as the most trustworthy person on earth? And yet you trust me not?" And so the man was actually questioning the justice in which the Prophet ﷺ was actually distributing the charity, and he questioned that, and that's what he was addressing. And so that, brothers, is actually not within, that's considered a blasphemy to do something like that, to question anything that the Prophet ﷺ actually did. So the man turned back, and whereupon he started walking away, and one of those that was present asked for permission to kill him, because he basically was clearly disrespecting the Prophet ﷺ. And so they asked for permission to kill him, but the Prophet ﷺ, he said, leave him, verily from his progeny of this man shall come people who will recite Quran, but it won't pass beyond their throats. They will slay the followers of Islam and would spare the people of idolatry. They will pierce through the religion just like an arrow which goes clean through its prey. From this story, we can derive many characteristics of this group of people that the Prophet ﷺ is actually referring to and speaking about. So in the first khutbah, what I'd like to do is really talk about this first group, which the Prophet himself actually mentioned them as the people that are called Khawaarij. They are outside. And Kharaja means to leave, outside of. These people are Khawaarij, meaning they are outside the fold of Islam. And inshallah, in the second khutbah, all I will do is talk about how these people, these type of people, come in many different ages. And even in this day and age, in the modern times we're living in, there is a group of people that are considered Khawaarij as well. And so remember that now in the history, it was only about 2 or 3 decades after this incident happened that there emerged a group of people during the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That actually, as we know the story, I'll be very brief because it's a very long one, and we're in the khutbah, not in the class. That there was a disagreement between Muawiyah and Ali ibn Abi Talib. And they were about to go to battle, but it was actually settled by a mutual kind of arbitration. Muawiyah appointed one person, and Ali ibn Abi Talib appointed another person, and it basically came to a mutual agreement in regards to that. But this group of people, they didn't accept whatever arbitration had taken place. And their response to why they didn't accept it was they said there is no judgment except for Allah's. There's no judgment except for me. You can't arbitrate a matter that has to be left to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so technically, they're right. However, as Ali mentions in his rulings, he says, a word of truth intended for something that was false. So they were speaking as if they were true. And whatever they used was actually true. But the intent behind whatever they were using as justification was something that is baseless within Islam. It was false. It was something that was baseless. So a group of them, some people say it was 12,000 of them, actually broke away from Ali, and they rejected him as something that was an apostle, meaning they rejected him as Khalifa and even as a Muslim. And Ali, in spite of that, he actually gave them a respite. He said that we're not going to fight you. You can go live in your own separate land, and as long as you don't, harm anybody, or you don't, chastise anybody, or you just leave it up to yourselves, then you're free to be as you are. And that is the spirit of Islam. And that's the first point that I wanted to mention. But the Khawaarij obviously didn't do that. They started causing mischief in the land. And so we come to the second prediction of this hadith that's mentioned, and that is that they will slay the followers of Islam and would spare the people of idolatry. So as it is, as they began to terrorize the land, everybody who was passing by, all those things, they would basically stop them, they would question them, and then either they would kill them and take them, or they would let them go. And so one time, they actually they captured one of the sons of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. His name was Abdullah ibn Khabbab ibn Arad. And so a number of the Khawaarij, they rode into a village that they needed supplies from, and they thought that they would make an example of the son of this companion, Abdullah. And so they captured him. They started asking him a question. The first thing they asked him was, well, what do you think about Abu Bakr and Uthman and Umar? And so he answered, they were great people. And so they said, okay, that's fine. And then they asked him the question, and they said, what do you think about Ali? What do you think about Ali and the state that he was before and after the arbitration that had taken place? And so Abdullah responded back, and he said, he has far greater knowledge about Allah than you do, and much more piety in terms of religion, and possesses greater insight. And so with that, in the terms of these people that were Khawaarij, his fate was sealed, that they were going to kill him eventually. And so they began to drag him, they bound him up, him and his wife, who was actually pregnant, and they bound him up, and they began to drag him through the streets of that village that was there. And as they were dragging him, this village was actually near a river and near some plantation of date palms. And as they were dragging him through the street, there was one date that fell from the date palm. And so one of the Khawaarij, he picked it up and began to eat it. And the other people, they began to chastise him. He said, how dare you pick up something that doesn't belong to you and eat from it? And so he was forced to spit it out. And another of them, because as he was wielding his sword, he actually ended up killing one of the cows that was in the village that didn't belong to him. And so again, they said, how dare you? You killed the cow that didn't belong to you. You have to pay recompense for this cow that you killed. And so they waited for him until this person went to the owner of the cow, they paid him the money, and then he came back. Now think about exactly what's happened in the situation. They're sending, or they're dragging one of the sons of the companions of the Prophet through the streets with his pregnant wife, and they eventually ended up killing him and slitting the wife's stomach to let the baby die, and then also the wife died. And yet they're so concerned about how being able to recompense somebody for a date palm and a cow, then they would have to be Muslim. So this is the mess up in priorities that these people actually end up having. But that being said, we need to be very, very clear that these people are Muslim. Right? I mean, they never left the fold of Islam. That's how Ali ibn Abi Talib treated them. As the majority of the scholars have said that these people never left the fold of Islam. That's the majority opinion. There is a minor opinion as well. But we, as an ummah, we cannot stoop to their level of making everybody that we disagree with somebody who's a kafir, somebody who's a disbeliever. Because that's their tactic. They believe that if you disagree with them, then you're wrong and I'm right and you're a kafir. That's their belief. But what Ali ibn Abi Talib said, was something different, because remember what the Prophet said in the hadith that I mentioned earlier. The Prophet said they will pierce through the religion just like an arrow goes clean through its prey. What you would get from that, if you read just the text itself, that these people have left the fold of Islam. But Ali ibn Abi Talib knew that hadith also. And he also knew, he had a complete understanding of the religion of Islam. So the majority of the views of the scholars is what Ali ibn Abi Talib said when he was asked about these people. The first time somebody asked him, he said, aren't the Khawaarij mushrikun? Right? Are they idolaters? And Ali ibn Abi Talib replied back, he said, they flee from shirk. They're not committing idolatry, they're the ones who flee from shirk. And so the second question was asked, and they said, are these people munafiqun? Are these people the hypocrites? And Ali ibn Talib responded back, he said, the hypocrites, they remember Allah only but a little. And these people, they remember Allah a lot. So they can't be hypocrites. And then so they asked them, so what are they? If they're not hypocrites and they're not mushrikeen, what? If they're not idolaters, what are they? And Ali ibn Abi Talib responded back, and he said, إِخْوَانَنَا بَغْوَى عَلَيْنَا. He said, they are our brothers who transgressed against us, so we fought them in their transgression. That is how we treat people, meaning that we treat people in their actions, not in their being. If somebody's doing something wrong, you say that action which you are performing is wrong. We don't say you are wrong. If a person is acting as a Muslim in the form of a disbelief, you say what you are doing is disbelief, you should leave that. We don't call the person a disbeliever, we don't call the people something else, because we don't know who at the end is going to be a believer in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who is not. So the Prophet ﷺ also said about them, right? And keep in mind, he said, they will arise among you a people whose prayer will make your prayer look insignificant. That means they pray so much that you're going to feel embarrassed about how you pray. And then he said, whose fasting will make your fasting look insignificant. And whose deeds will make your deeds look insignificant. And he's describing the Khawaarij of these people. And they will recite the Quran, but it won't pass beyond their throats. Right? And many different hadith actually talk about this issue. So many of them are actually repeated over and over, because the Prophet, it was very serious about these people. And Ibn Abbas, said about the Khawaarij, what happened was, and I'll talk about this a little bit later also, that he went to the people of these Khawaarij to be able to negotiate with them, to be able to figure out what is it that you don't believe, and how can we fix it, because Abdullah bin, Ibn Abbas was a very, very deep understanding of the Quran. And so he knew exactly he might be able to convince them otherwise. So when he was walking through the camp to be able to try to convince them of their wrong ways, this is how he described them. He said, I came to them in midday and entered upon the people, the likes of whom I haven't seen in terms of their execution or their exertion of worship. And another narration, it says that when he walked in the afternoon, when everybody, all the Arabs, they do what's called a qaylula, they sleep in the afternoon, he could hear the Quran being recited in the homes of these people. Right? He could hear the Quran being recited. So they exert themselves in worship. Their foreheads were grazed with constant prostration. Meaning when you put your head on the ground, you're going to have a mark on your face, on your forehead. So their forehead was grazed with prostration. Their hands were rough like camels. Why? Because if you notice the knees of the camels, when they kneel down, you're going to get rough. So the hands, they pray so much that their hands were rough. They pray so much that they had a mark on their forehead. They wore recently washed, girded up tunics, and their faces were pale from staying up at night. And their faces were pale. So these people will put you in shame. If you look at the outer aspects of religion, we are nobody compared to these people. And yet the Prophet ﷺ, upon his Khawaarij, he said that they will leave this religion as an arrow leaves or enters and then leaves your prey. And so we have to be careful about the people, because I know in this ummah we have a lot of people who somehow sympathize with these kind of groups of people. And we look at people and say, well, he looks like a good man. He has a big beard. He has pants that he rolled up high. He always makes dhikr of Allah. He must be a good man. And what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us here is that that is not the mark of a good person. A good person is not one who can grow his beard, because a non-Muslim can grow a beard. In fact, he can probably grow a beard better than we can. So a good person is not a person who can manifest whatever's in the outside of Islam. A good person is what is inside of your heart. And whatever is inside of your heart is good, then that emanates out and manifests beauty in the person that's there. That is the true nature of a mu'min, not on the outer personality or outer things that anybody is able to do. So we have to be careful of these people. In the older times, the Prophet ﷺ made a great tradition, and he also said that in subsequent generations, there will be people who will be like this. There will be people that are Khawaarij, meaning that they will put your worship to shame, and they will leave this religion as an arrow leaves its prey. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from these people and to make us of those who are never associated with these people. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله ولكم فاستغفروه. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So, brothers, the reason why I spent the first book by talking about an old group of deviants called the Khawaarij is because they are not only a group of yesteryears. Meaning they're not a group only that came before and they're no longer going to come again. The Prophet ﷺ, as I mentioned, said a group of young men will rise up reciting the Quran, but it won't pass beyond their throats. Whenever a group appears, right, which is implying there's not only one group, but he said whenever a group appears, it is to be cut off until the day of judgment, until the Dajjal arises at their tail end. And then Ibn Umar has reported to Abdullah ibn Umar said, I heard the Prophet saying about this quote, this part saying, each time a group appears, it should be cut off. He said he remembers the Prophet saying that 20 different times. There are 20 different warnings of the Prophet ﷺ about these group of people that are there. And so we know that the Prophet ﷺ was, he was sent as a mercy for mankind. That we have not sent him except as a mercy for mankind. And even when people attacked him, his natural inclination was towards mercy. So if he responds back with something that is not merciful, then you know it's something serious. If a merciful person responds back and he says something about a person which is not in mercy, then you know it's something very, very serious that this group of people have, or that type of thing. And one of the definitions that he gave, many bad things about the Khawaarij, one of the things that he said was, Al-Khawaarij hum kilab an-nar, that the Khawaarij are the dogs of the hellfire. Now this is Rahmatan al-Alameen, right? This is the merciful, the person who is meant as a mercy for all of creation. And yet he's the person who's saying this about this group of people. And so we talk about this, and let's kind of break this down a little bit. Why am I mentioning in this part of the khutbah? Is because a couple of days ago there was a list that was released by the non-Islamic State about the people, the list of people in the West, whether it be in Europe or in the United States, that they consider as kafir, and their lives are allowed for people to take. That's their belief. And a lot of these people, there are very great scholars in there. There are friends of mine in there. I mean, there's a lot of people in this. So I got a little bit agitated, and so thought I'd talk about this in my khutbah today, because these people are far from the religion of Islam. So the first thing, what Prophet ﷺ said was that they have to be cut off. So what does this cut off actually imply? What does it actually mean? And in my opinion, obviously it doesn't mean that we as individuals need to be vigilantes and go out there and do whatever we can. I mean, this is referring to a state. Whenever a group rises, the state has to take the responsibility to be able to cut these people off, to cut this group off. Because again, and what does that really mean? It doesn't mean necessarily to kill them. Because again, Ali ibn Abi Talib knew about what the Prophet said, and yet he didn't kill them automatically. He basically let them be until they caused mischief in the land. And when you cause mischief in the land, then then it's okay for the state to be able to come in and be able to take care of you. And this is one of the things that I wanted to speak about, because what we have to do is we have to realize within our own lives, brothers, we have little inklings of these things. We have little things that we do that if we let them go, then we get people of Khawaarij as a result of whatever we do. If we let them go within society in our individual thoughts and our individual actions that we do, then we are nurturing a people something along these lines. So what is it that in this cutoff that we have is that we must be tolerant of all people who say the Shahada. Right? We have to be tolerant of all people who say the Shahada. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions also in the Quran that the believers are the ones that are easy on the believers and are shidda al kuffar, meaning that they're stern with the non-believers. Means that they're merciful amongst each other and they're stern with the non-believers. And so here amongst each other is talking about those who give the shahada. So we shouldn't be the ones to be able to judge. Well, after you said that shahada, well, you haven't done this and you haven't done that, you haven't this, so that's why you're okay to be cut off or to be killed, and that type of thing. So whether you are a Shia or whether you're any other group, as long as you say the shahada, it's not for us to be able to decide whether that person is going to end up in Jannah or not. Because even if you know, even in yourself, you know for a fact that you are right, how do you really know? And even if you're right now, how do you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to misguide you into something that you knew very, very for sure of in the past? And so we don't know all of these things, and we should leave that and never commit takfir, or never commit, by saying something that these people are out of the fold of Islam. Because when you go down that road, of being intolerant, then there's no end. Right? There's no end. Because if you tolerate something, you say, okay, everything is acceptable. When you start saying that A is not acceptable, then another group will come and say, well, A and B is not acceptable, so you're wrong. And you're a kafir. And then a third group will come and say, wait, A and B are not enough, you need C also. And if you're not only A and B and you're not C, then you're a kafir too. And so it just keeps going on and on and on. And so basically it's a race towards destruction. And that's exactly, if you look at the non-Islamic state, that's exactly what they've done. They've taken a group of terrorists, which is Al-Qaeda, and they've told them, well, you're kafir because you haven't done enough. And so now they're fighting them in Iraq, they're fighting them in Syria, and now in Afghanistan. This non-Islamic state is fighting Al-Qaeda because they're not strict enough in their takfir of Muslims like all over the world. So this is the path that we lead down if we start doing that to ourselves. So the message here is, and in order for us to be able to cut off any kind of feeding that we do to the Khawaarij, we have to be tolerant ourselves. There's no room for intolerance within our society. Which leads me to the second point of how we actually fight the Khawaarij, which in modern times, as I mentioned, is called the non-Islamic state of Iraq and Syria. There's many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ saying that the Khawaarij will be young people. Young people. Now, one can take this as literally a young person, or one can take this as a person who is young in their religion. Because a common characteristic amongst the young is that they are overzealous. Right? They want to practice their religion as perfectly as possible. And everything for them is a black and white. It's right, wrong, black, white, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong. That's how that their mind frame is, because they're overzealous about the religion that they have. But in reality, they don't understand that the religion is something which there is a lot of things in the gray area, or there's a lot of things that the scholars have opined upon, and there's differences of opinion. And there's differences of opinion about them. And so that's why the Prophet ﷺ said that they will recite the Quran beautifully. They will recite the Quran beautifully, but it will not go past their throat, meaning that they read it like most of us do, and yet we don't understand it. Right? Most of us only speak the Arabic language to be able to understand what's going on in the Quran. So this is the same way with them. They read the Quran, and yet they don't understand exactly what is being said. Now, in the example of what I told you earlier about Abdullah ibn Abbas going to them and talking to them about what they were believing in and how can he help them to understand, there was three basic things that they actually, Abdullah ibn Abbas argued with them about. Argued in a good way. Argued with them about. And so I don't have time to mention all of them, but one of the things that they said was that the arbiter is always Allah. And he said, it's in the Quran. And Abdullah bin Salam said, yes, you're right. But it also says in the Quran that if there's a marriage dispute, right, if you have a dispute in marriage, then the wife's family should appoint an arbiter, and the husband's family should appoint an arbiter, and they should get together, and they should decide on the matter. And Abdullah bin Abbas said, do you think that shedding bloodshed is more than marriage or less? You think about it now, you're like, oh yeah, that's logical, right? That bloodshed is far more serious than marriage. And so if you can appoint an arbiter in marriage, why would you not be able to appoint an arbiter to be able to prevent the bloodshed of the Muslims? But this is sometimes the logic we get into as well, even if you're not part of the Khawaarij, which is you read an ayah in the Quran, you're like, this is it. Because it says in the Quran, this has to be the way it is. And you go about telling everybody that you have that this is the way that you have to practice your religion. And if we have no understanding of all the different nuances or other parts of the Quran that say something else, or all of those different things, and then we believe that this is the way it has to be. Like I know in the US, there's a group of people that go around and say that the khutbah can only be in Arabic. They have this belief that the khutbah can only be in Arabic. Now we're living in a Muslim country, a non-Muslim country. Most of us don't, in the US I'm talking about, we live in a non-Muslim country. Many of us don't speak the English language, and so what these people who believe is they give the exact same Arabic khutbah week after week for years upon years. I've seen it happen myself. And to be able to go through that is ridiculous. But even because scholars have said that it's okay to be able to give your khutbah in the English language, and yet these people don't understand, they don't follow it. So these types of things, we have to understand that there are differences of opinion. And if you have your opinion, alhamdulillah, but that doesn't mean that opinion is the only opinion. And that doesn't mean that you have to be able to impose it on somebody else, especially if there's many opinions that are out there. And there are many people who do that. And so my response to that, because I have a little bit knowledge, I usually just keep quiet because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, He says, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. He says, when the ignorant people approach you, give them salam. Because there's no point in arguing with them. If somebody comes up to you, brother, you have to wear your pants high because that's the sunnah. What kind of logic are you going to use with them to be able to convince them otherwise? Whether it's a difference of opinion out there, this scholar said this. All he's going to say is, no, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm going to do it. And the extreme part of that, they're going to call you a kafir because of it. There's no logic and there's nothing to be able to gain, by that, to be able to do because of them. Because our religion is a religion, it's a beautiful religion. And if you see something that's ugly and bad, you have to know that this is not from our religion. It cannot be. It's something that the division is rejected in Islam. It's not. We have to unite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that we unite on the robe of Allah. It's not that we divide ourselves. La tafarraqu. Don't have divisions amongst each other, right? And that's the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so finally, it must be pointed out that I'm not, justifying or absolving responsibility of other powers like the United States and other people of the mess that's created in Iraq and those type of things, which gave rise to, which was the basic cause of what's happening with non-Islamic State. I'm not justifying or absolving them of any responsibility, but we have to understand, brothers, that these people are Muslim. They are not Jews and Christians that are going to Iraq and fighting against Muslims over there. Right? These people, they are Muslims and they're from our brothers and sisters, meaning that the people that are going there from the United States, they're going from Europe, even going there from Malaysia, these are Muslims, they're not anybody else. So it's, we can't constantly just keep blaming the Jews and the Christians for our problems. We have to take responsibility for what it is that we're doing within our lives to be able to cause the situation to happen. And so we need to stop blaming others and see what we can do to rectify the situation. How it is that I can prevent my child or our children from becoming these type of people. What is it that I can do within my own life? Because blame is not something that's part of our religion. We have to take responsibility, and that's what's taught. Very, very early on, in the very beginning, when Adam alayhi salam, when he was tempted by Shaitan, he didn't go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, he tempted me, it wasn't my fault. He didn't say that. He said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِنْ لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. Oh Allah, I have wronged myself. Even though Shaitan was the one who tempted me, I wronged my own self. This is our responsibility as an ummah. This creation of al-Qaeda, this creation of ISIS, all these people, this is our responsibility. We are the ones that should be changed. It's not, I'm not the one doing it, this is all the Christians and the Jews and and the United States and China and Russia and everybody else that we can blame except for ourselves. This is not our way. Our way is to say we accept our responsibility. Oh Allah, guide us to be able to fix whatever it is that we've done wrong, and to be able to forgive us for whatever it is that we've done wrong. So we have to own up to this responsibility, and we will blame nobody but ourselves for this. But also part of this, and so part of this feeding of this group is people coming from Malaysia or from Europe and those type of things. We have to understand, one of the ways that we fight that is even the little languages that we use, even amongst our kids. Right? So you're sitting there and you're watching TV, and something comes on there, and you start, cursing, the West or anything along those lines, and you start doing some things that you, in your 40 or 50 years of knowledge and understanding, you know exactly what you're saying. But if you're doing it in front of your 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old son or daughter, they don't understand the same understanding you have. And they might be led down a path by your sins because they respect you as a father or as a mother. They respect you, and they might be going down a path that you had no idea that they would be going down because of something that you said. So we have to, that's what I'm talking about when we say we have to take responsibility. We have to stop blaming others. We have to stop cursing other people. We have to rise up and be able to say, this is our responsibility to be able to do that. How do I prevent people from my own country, from my own society, from the Ummah, to be able to join these radical, groups that the Prophet clearly talked about as being Khawaarij, to be able to do that. And so, extremism is not only. The last thing I want to say is extremism is not something that's only part of Islam. It is found in all societies, and it's found in all cultures and all religions. Because it's how you interpret, it's your nature as a person that will determine whether you're an extremist or not. And there's certain people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made that way. But something has to be done to be able to cure that. And the reason why I actually mentioned that is because one of the things that Ibn Kathir said, which was very eye-opening for me, he said if the Khawaarij ever gained power, this is Ibn Kathir, right, who lived a few hundred years ago. He said if the Khawaarij ever gained power, they would corrupt the entire earth, Iraq and Syria. Right? They would corrupt the entire Iraq and Syria. But he goes on. He says they would not leave alone a boy or a girl or a man or a woman. Now listen to this. He also said, for in their view, the people have become so corrupt that they cannot be reformed except by mass killing. Meaning that the people, the Ummah, has become so bad that there's no hope left for them. And so the only way we can clear the Ummah of any impurities is that we kill everybody. And that, brothers and sisters, is what is happening right now. The majority of the people that are being killed by ISIS is not in Europe and it's not in America. It's our own brothers and sisters in Iraq, in Syria, in Pakistan, in other places, in Turkey, those type of places. It's our own people. Why are they doing it? Because of this reason. Because they think we've gone so far away in their interpretation that we cannot be cured. We have to be killed. And that's not something that's foreign even to Hollywood movies, if you think about it. Right? I mean, how many times have we seen Hollywood movies where they talk about an alien race coming down and they take over mankind? And why are they doing it? Because there's no hope for mankind left. Right? Or other people, these mad scientists create this virus and they're going to kill mankind. Why? Because mankind has become so bad that there's no cure for it except for being able to eradicate the entire race. There's no different than that. That's extremism. Extremism happens in every religion, in every culture. And that's exactly what's happening over here, when you think about it. So they're not going to stop doing that because that's their fundamental belief in being able to eradicate or do these mass killings that Ibn Kathir is actually talking about. So it's very, very clear that all of these things, how were predicted by our beloved messengers of Allah. All we have to do is learn more about it to know that, hey, this group is existing today. What do we have to do to be able to cut them off? What is our responsibility individually to be able to do that? So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from ignorance and from extremism. O Allah, root out all evil within our ummah. O Allah, make us of those who accept responsibility for our actions and their outcomes, and not blame others. And after accepting our responsibility, O Allah, forgive us our sins and our shortcomings. O Allah, give us the strength to change the wrong things that are around us, and the patience with the things that we can change that are within our grasp, and to give us the insight and the understanding to know the difference between the two. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار.